For this installment of Current Reflections on Building Partnerships, we are joined by longtime tribal college leader Jim Shanley. Dr. Shanley is a member of the Fort Peck Assiniboine and Sioux tribes and began his service as an administrator at United Tribes Technical College, where he served as academic dean. He was later recruited as president of Standing Rock Community College, now Sitting Bull College. Eventually, he returned home where he served as president of Fort Peck Community College for 28 years. An early leader and organizer in the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, Dr. Shanley helped shepherd the landmark Tribally Controlled Community Colleges Act through Congress and into law. He also helped found the American Indian College Fund. So thanks so much for joining us today, Dr. Shanley.
It's my privilege.
Well, we're especially glad that you're joining us today, considering your long experience helping to build partnerships between tribal colleges and other organizations, agencies, and institutions. And so let me just start by asking a very simple, open-ended question. Why are partnerships so important?
Well, partnerships, I think, and that's a real broad concept. But the tribal colleges have for the most part been fairly small and not very well funded in terms of some of their base funding when they first began. And in order to accomplish their missions, they had to have help from other people. And I think without building partnerships, I don't think the colleges would have ever been able to get to the point that they are today. There are, when that's the big disadvantage that tribal colleges have always had is numbers. And it's the reverse of having too many, it's always having too few. And education in the 20th century became a game for universities and colleges of critical mass, where you have to have so much critical mass in order to provide the service. For example, like in most of the countries, veterinarian schools were regionalized. There was one veterinarian school for about every 5 or 6 states. And that was set up because the veterinarians felt that they would produce too many veterinarians if they had a veterinary school in each state. So they formed these cooperative agreements and partnerships, and they would funnel, if, for example, in the North Dakota region, I think it was North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota. There's like 5 or 6 states there that all contributed to one veterinarian school. Anyway, that's the idea of the critical mass, that you have to have so many numbers in order to be able to do a certain particular thing. And like I said, being small and without a lot of resources, tribal colleges just had to look to other people for help.
As someone who's, I'm sorry, and were you going to say something there?
No.
Okay. As someone who's seen the tribal college movement grow and flourish like you have, how have partnerships between TCUs and outside entities changed over the years?
Well, I think it would be helpful and to categorize partnerships in 3 or 4 different areas. And those types of, then it's easier to understand how the things are related. For example, there are institution to institution types of partnerships. In other words, Fort Peck Community College could form a relationship with Montana State University College in Billings, or with Salish Kootenai College in Pablo, Montana. But it's between two separate entities. There's those types of partnerships. They're usually fairly specific, and oftentimes they have some legal ramifications, in the sense because the sharing involves programs and money and things that affect people. So if there's legalities involved, for example, it's nice to have a partnership and just be, you're my best buddy, let's go drink beer. But that's not the type of partnerships we're talking about. In most cases, there's some sort of documentation or agreement that's written up, and the agreement spells out what people expect on both sides to receive from the partnership. Mm-hmm. In other words, if it's, for example, say if it was with Fort Peck Community College and Salish, they might say, we want to participate in your nursing program. Therefore, we will provide 6 Fort Peck students to Salish Kootenai each fall, and if they're acceptable in terms of their academic abilities, Salish will agree to accept those students at their tuition cost for a course of 2 years or whatever it takes to get the nursing degree. So that it's clearly spelled out what's expected from each entity. And a crucial thing about making a partnership successful is that both entities have to gain from the relationship. In other words, they're not supposed to do something for nothing. I mean, there are people that say, hey, we believe in helping other people and we want a partnership with you because we want to help you. Mm-hmm. But very seldom in a true partnership does that amount to much. If you want to get benefits from partnerships, it's best that there's something that's received on both ends. Now, there are some relationships and partnerships that are not necessarily legal or do not require legal sorts of agreements. And there are also multi-partner partnerships. For example, like the American Indian Higher Education Consortium is essentially a partnership. Mm-hmm. It's a partnership between all of the tribal colleges. And the legal issues that have been defining that relationship were all brought in and developed by all of the colleges as a whole rather than as any single institution. And it's been very beneficial to each of the people, each of the participating institutions. Then you have partnerships that are, we have partnerships with the partnerships. For example, the American Indian Higher Education Consortium has a partnership with the historically Black colleges and universities. And with those historically Black colleges and universities, it's been a pretty minor partnership in the sense that there's really not a lot of direct activity, but we have participated in lobbying for particular legislation. They've helped us participate in certain other partnerships like the land grant institutions. There have been particular kinds of funding programs that have been developed that have shared resources and students and facilities and programs between black colleges and universities and tribal colleges. There have been any number of types of things that have developed. So we almost have a partnership between the association partners and then individual institutions involved with either of those entities. So, and like I said, in some instances, legally spelled out, in other instances, not. It's been more of a good time, kind of, we'll help each other out sort of thing. And in any case, all of those partnerships have worked to a great deal.
So for tribal colleges specifically, what do you believe are the most important factors to consider when building partnerships?
Well, I think you have to look at what you need. You have to look at what your mission is, what your reservation needs, what your institution needs, what your communities need. Now, for example, up here, you have Fort Peck Community College, and you have Fort Belknap, and I'm not for Belknap. You have Standing Rock, and the northern reservations that are located on the Missouri River. Mm-hmm. We all have some issues. This is on the negative end, issues with how gas and oil are developed in the northern plains and how it's transported, because the chances of polluting reservation lands are pretty. There's a great possibility of that happening. Mm-hmm. And that, this is something that means life for the people on the reservation, because they need water. Yeah. And so you can see some cooperative factors between Standing Rock and Fort Peck. Standing Rock was facing Keystone, and of course, Standing Rock was facing DAPL, and then Fort Peck is facing Keystone. And so there are some other kinds of issues that can be partnered on, and those are issue driven, I would call them. Now, they may also be issue driven in a positive manner, whereas we may have a very successful oil and gas business on the reservations, and so we may have common training needs for oil and gas with 4 or 5 different other reservations and our tribal colleges. And so some of those things can be used as a basis of relationships between the individual institutions or even a group. So it has there can be a negative kind of partnership and a positive. And by I shouldn't say negative, but a defensive types of partnerships and very positive ones. Yeah. Another point that I should make, and that we always considered to be extremely important at Fort Peck, was that the college has to have a partnership with the community. Mm-hmm. In other words, you don't exist outside of the community. The idea that that some people can develop a little ivory teepee and tell everybody on the reservation how to live or how to be educated or how to think about life, that doesn't exist. And so partnerships and close partnerships have to be developed with the people that live in the communities. That would include the governments. And by governments, I mean governments plural, the tribal government, the state governments, the county governments, the school districts, the cities, And all of those people work towards things that make a better life for the individual that lives in an area. You know, we need better roads, we need better water, we need better broadband infrastructure, we need, you know, a whole series of things. But it's by building those local partnerships and working together that we can really, that communities can really improve the standard of living for the people that live there. And I think that that's one of the things that you've seen with the tribal colleges. They haven't been just solely an institution of higher education. They have stretched out that mission limit so that they can try to impact the things that are really important, you know, for the community. Now, you know, for example, like during this COVID thing, I don't know how much the tribal colleges have helped with the COVID thing. I think that they cooperated and did everything that they possibly could to try to ensure that people got vaccinated on the reservations, but I'm not positive.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the communities are an essential part. It should be they should be the first leg of the partnerships that you think about developing, because it's from the needs analysis that you get out of that process that moves you into forming partnerships with other people.
So for new tribal college leaders who are listening to this and maybe just getting started in their leadership, you know, forming partnerships there's a process and there are best practices. Can you kind of elaborate on that? How can tribal college leaders today best forge partnerships that benefit their institutions and communities?
Well, let me put it this way, and some of this comes down to the individual person, and sometimes it comes down to organizational types of things. But organizations are funny creatures. You know, bureaucracies are kind of like they're kind of like kudzo. You know, they're a vine that grows on its own, and once they get started, if they get a firm hold, they go whichever way they want, no matter what happens. The Bureau of Indian Affairs being probably the first and foremost example that applies to our history. But unfortunately, some of those tendencies in terms of organizational development have occurred in Indian country, and to quite an extent. So there are people that have this idea of territory and empire. In other words, I'm going to build the best tribal college in the world, and I'm never going to, you know, and we aren't going to talk to those Indians that are, you know, right down, you know, 100 miles away in another part of the state, because hell with them. We're going to be better than them. Our tribe is going to be better. We're going to be tribalistic. We're going to be an empire of our own. and so you get people that organizations tend to bring out the worst sometimes in people who want to build empires. And those people do not usually have open minds. Their minds are closed to communication with their own communities, and they're usually closed to relationships with other people, regardless of the reason for those relationships. And you know, I would urge people to try not to build an empire. Try to build something that belongs to the community. And as that goes, keep an open mind as to what your college can do to make the community better. I mean, you may be the only organization in your little town that owns a street sweeping machine. Well, if you are, sweep the streets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The thing is, let's help out in any way that we possibly can, and try to have an open mind about the way that we do it, and try to listen to other people. And I know it's pretty hard. At least that's what Nancy tells me all the time. for me to listen.
So in your career as a tribal college leader, what were some of the most beneficial partnerships that you witnessed?
Oh, absolutely. The consortium, the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, and the American Indian College Fund are the two primary ones. And then we had dozens of other relationships. We had some great relationships with Rocky Mountain College. We had some great science relationships with historically Black colleges. We had other types of things. One thing that AHEC has never been really very successful at doing, which is kind of surprising, is we've never really been able to do consistent athletic things. You know, we always wanted to have an AHEC-wide partnership that, where we could play basketball and baseball and track and other types of, rodeo or whatever. And we just never have been able to, the resources and abilities that would exist in one spot, and then they would go away and they'd turn up in another spot, and we just never quite were able to get it done. The relationships have also been good, I think, with the federal government, and in some instances, the tribal colleges have had good relationships with the state government through their university systems and colleges. Mm-hmm. Those would be probably the primary thing, and then on the local level, of course, tribal government, Indian Health Service, BIA, all of the other people that live and work here.
Mm-hmm. What about examples of some of the worst partnerships that you've witnessed over the years?
Well, I don't know if I want to get into any of those, but there have been a few. We've it's no secret that we fought over the way our money is distributed, and in some cases, the position of particular institutions has been extremely self-serving, and other people have been not so self-serving. But I think one of the problems with the larger associations and stuff is that we don't have enough participation, and people don't tend to get involved until something happens, and there's some some emergency. Then they're all involved and wondering what happened, and if their participation 3 or 4 years earlier might have prevented it. And I think that's been part of the problem too. Like, for example, with the consortium, with the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, we didn't want to face the realities of how it had to be funded for years. We tried to cheap it out, and it didn't work. Mm-hmm. And we had a couple of bad experiences, and suddenly we found ourselves in some dire straits. And so we had to come up with some more logical, reasonable ways to support ourselves. Mm-hmm. That's one example.
Interesting. So what parting advice can you offer to up and coming TCU leaders as they enter into new partnerships with outside entities?
Talk to as many people as you can. Be very, very open in terms of your communications, and try to have an open mind about the way things are going. that doesn't mean that you can't have that you don't make judgments about things. You do make judgments, but make sure they're made on reasonable basis. And you know, one of the things that I used to do all the time is I used to try to copy people, copy best practices, and like I would constantly review Joe McDonald's program offerings and the way that he was doing things, because I thought Joe came up with some really, he came up with some really good programs that really served people.
Mm-hmm.
And as a consequence, we were able to copy some of Salish's stuff, and I think that it was great. There are other institutions that have done things very well, that really need to be looked at.
Mm-hmm.
I think as we move forward in terms of language development and stuff like that, people really need to help each other out, because the various elements they're moving forward, but they're struggling, to try to insert the language into modern society.
Hmm.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, no, that's great. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, I just want to again thank you for sharing all these words of wisdom and these insights. This is so important for the tribal college movement and for posterity. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, well, it's been my pleasure.
Great. Well, you take care, and hopefully we'll be talking to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.